Hi folks, Rory at Clawdon Painting Studio with the next video in the 6mm Republican Roman army build series. We're going to look at painting some Hastati slash principes. It's the same cast from Baccus. A word on model preparation and selection. With the 6mm ones, chances are there's going to be a couple of miscasts or broken pieces. The plumes on these command figures, there's a bit of a mould line there. You can take them off carefully with a file. But if you've got extras, spend a wee bit more time fishing around in the bag. A couple of things you might find is underneath where the models were attached. There's a sprue gate for the casting process that can be clipped and filed. The plumes tend to be the area that doesn't cast the best. Now you don't have to be that fussy. Obviously these are tiny, so they're not really going to be noticeable on a battlefield. But it's worth taking time going through the models that you have and choosing the best looking ones. It'll be easier to paint if you don't have massive mould problems. To paint 6mm figures, I glue them down onto a lolly stick. This represents one base, so I've got 24 models in total there. And I have primed these black. This is going to just put the natural shadowing in the deepest parts of the sculpt, which are hard to get to with a brush. First step I'm going to do is I'm going to bring out the detail by dry brushing with some off-white. So with a makeup brush, most of the Vallejo off-white cleaned away on a piece of paper. Just a very simple dry brush. We're not trying to colour the model, just picking out the details so that it's a bit easier to see. And if you can do from a top-down direction, you will just help with the highlighting on the model. The colours that you apply will look a bit lighter over these areas that are catching the off-white. I'm going to tackle the strips that they're attached to. They have been sculpted with some texture, so you will be able to get a nice rough ground effect just by painting these in. I've got some Vallejo flat earth. I don't really care if I get it on their feet or the bottom of the shields or anything. Nobody can see the feet on 6mm figures, and it'll just look like they've been in the mud. I tend to work from deepest areas to the most raised areas, and that way if your brush gets some paint on something you don't want, it doesn't affect the finished look because you will be painting over. With some Vallejo Cork brown, I'm going to do the backs of the shields. You could just leave these with your primer colour. It's one of these details that only you as the player is going to see, but I like to think that I've got all the major details done. With the shield backs done, I'm going to do the skin with some Vallejo Extra Opaque Heavy Skintone. Working in a strip typically means you can just go right along. The command unit is a bit different, slightly different positioned models, so you may end up being a bit more involved painting them. But if I just go along and do all the faces, and there really isn't much to it at this point other than a blob of paint. You may find that we need to turn our strip to access the legs, for example. Let's try and get that on camera. Individually, we do not have to be too neat. It's the effect of the base at the end. And just for a look, when we turn around, we'll have the back of the model to do. Bare arms, bare legs. Sometimes it really is just an elbow on the back of the shield that we're picking out. I'm going to highlight the flesh with a mix of the extra opaque heavy skin tone with some Vallejo light flesh. I think that doing highlights on 6mm figures, we really should go for something quite stark and different for the highlight stage, because it will sort of blend together over a whole battlefield. We don't really have to do much other than sort of just do a couple of dots. Maybe just picking out the noses perhaps. Back of the model, play with the elbows and any bare heads there might be. But just a little dotting motion. It's really quite quick to do. And it'll pay dividends at the end. I have been using my Winsor Newton size 1 brush for the majority of the work so far. I had a tatty old brush for the bases. But something with a nice point on it is really useful. I'm going to do the tunics next with some Vallejo model colour German Camo Beige. As we go along, again it's sort of just a dotting motion. The raised areas will pick this up with a bit of shadowing in the recesses. Again, we're going to highlight now. I've added Ivory to the mix. The fronts of the tunics, we can really only get a brush to the lower half. There would be some pectoral armour that we'll paint a different colour later. On the backs of the model, it's going after the raised surfaces. Again, just this dotting motion. Time to break out the size 0 brush to do some leather work on the model. So we've got a scabbard just below the elbow, a belt, and there's sort of a cross strap across the back here. Use the raised areas to guide you. I'm using Vallejo Beige Brown for this step. That's a view of the straps done. I'm going to go look at our shields now. I've decided that my Hastati are going to have yellow shields. I'm going to do different coloured shields for the Hastati Principes and Triarii. It makes it a bit easier to work out who's who on the battlefield. So with some Vallejo Extra Opaque Heavy Ochre, we're going to do our base coat on all the shields. Takes a couple of coats of the heavy ochre to get that nice consistent base colour. The shields represent sort of the most eye-catching area of any unit at this scale, so we're going to highlight this twice. The top 2/3 I'm going to paint with Vallejo flat yellow. This is some Vallejo lemon yellow, and I'm keeping this to just the top third of the shields as the final highlight. Got some swords to paint. Got an old knackered brush out with some RE Painter plate mail metal. With some Vallejo bronze, we'll pick out helmets, leaving the feather plumes as they are, also shield bosses. I'll probably have some pectoral armour to pick out. I have some Ivory Painter's Soft Tone, mixed 1:1 with Quickshade mixing medium. I'm doing an all over wash. The wash has settled in the recesses, brought out some more of the detail, blended some of the colours together, but we'll go back over some final highlights. So lots of ivory, almost 2 parts ivory to 1 part German Camo Beige. Just to bring out the colour on the tunics again. Bring back some of the skin highlights. That mix of Vallejo light skin tone and the extra opaque heavy skin tone. The lemon yellow to the very top of the shields once more. And highlight the bronze with some Vallejo gold. The very last highlights I'm going to do is with some pure ivory over our off-white cloth. Size 0 brush, very minimal. And these final highlights, almost tiny little dots, are just to make this white pop across the width of a table. And here we have our finished line of Hastati for the Republican Roman Army in 6mm. I've given them a coat of matte varnish since doing those final highlights. Hopefully that guide is easy to follow. I realise that it's a bit more in depth than a lot of the guides I usually do, but it's just something I like to do with 6mm, just to go that extra distance with the highlights. You could very well get away with blocking in colours and hitting them with a wash, of course, and you still get a decent effect once you have hundreds of these lined up on the table. We'll be following up this video with some more in the series. We'll look at Velites and Triarii as well, and then on to some of the allied units and opposing forces. Got any comments, please drop them in the box below and I will give them a read and get back to you. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.